So earlier this month I did a video on all of my unfinished series. I'll leave a link down to that below if you want to check it out, but there's over 75 series that I've started but not completed for various reasons, and in some cases I do not intend on finishing them. So today I'm going to be sharing those with you. When going through all of these, I found that there were two main reasons for why I don't particularly want to finish these series. The first of which are books that I got back in my childhood or quite a few years ago. Some of them I read several years ago, but some of them I read a little more recently, but they just aren't particularly to my taste anymore. Magic, book 1 from the Septimus Heap series by Angie Sage. I bought this forever ago and I remember trying to get into this book 2 or 3 times, but for some reason it just never happened. And I read this maybe a year or two ago, and while I did quite enjoy reading this, I know that I probably would have loved it had I read it when I was younger. And I just don't really have any particular interest in continuing on with this series. I do know that quite a lot of people love this, but I don't know. Next is The Spook's Apprentice by Joseph Delaney. I believe that in the US this title is The Last Apprentice, but same situation here. I bought this book many years ago and didn't read it until much recently, and it was pretty good. But the main reason why I read this was for a TBR challenge. I didn't like having books sitting on my shelf that were there for like 7 years or something ridiculous, so I read it. And that was that. The name of this book is Secret by Pseudonymous Bosch. Again, exact same situation here, but with this one, I don't remember any of this book at all. If I wanted to continue on with the other books, I'd have to reread this one, and to be honest, I don't particularly have any interest in doing so. The next one is The Last Dragon Chronicles by Chris DeLacy. I read the first book a while ago and really enjoyed it, so I then picked up the next 3 books. However, I kind of think it's partly my fault as to why I kind of lost interest. I picked up one of the books and read it, and it turned out it was the 3rd book and I'd skipped over the 2nd. So I finished that book and then I read the 2nd book and then I read the 4th book. So I was just confused, and I didn't quite enjoy the other books as much as this one. I think it took a direction that I wasn't a huge fan of. So I haven't picked up the rest of the books, and I don't think I ever will. I do kind of want to enjoy this first book again because I really loved it. So I don't know, maybe one day I'll reread this one, but I won't be doing that with the other books. Now with these last series, they are ones that I picked up. I either hated, really disliked, or I did kind of like them, but it's gotten to the point where I no longer have any interest in continuing the series. It hasn't left a big enough impression on me. So firstly, I have Nightshade by Andrea Kramer. This is about werewolves, and I read this during a stage where I wasn't a fan of werewolves, so that probably wouldn't have helped. That's mainly because of another book, which I'll mention in just a moment. I don't particularly remember much about this book, and I think I liked it, but I just don't have any urge to continue on, so I won't. So the book that had me kind of disliking werewolves for a little while was Shiver by Maggie Stiefvater. I really didn't like this book. I felt it was quite slow and boring, and I just didn't find the characters interesting. I do, however, own The Scorpio Races and The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater. I am much more intrigued by those stories, so I'm hoping that I like it much more than this one. Next is The Lux by Anna Godberson. I read this book last year, found it extremely predictable, and just kind of I didn't really dislike the book, but it didn't blow me away, and this is one that had been sitting on my shelf for like 3 years, and I've just kind of lost interest in it. The Forest of Hands and Teeth by Carrie Ryan. This is a book that I picked up because everybody was raving about it. I had extremely high expectations going into this book, and I found myself quite disappointed. I just wasn't blown away by it as everybody else seemed to have been. It wasn't bad, but I just wasn't particularly interested in continuing on. Next is Wither by Lauren DeStefano. When I read this, I really liked it. I think I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars, but it's gotten to the point now where I've just really lost interest, and I've heard some very mixed things about the rest of the series, so I just kind of have been putting off buying the other books even when I had the opportunity to do so. So I think that kind of says something about me wanting to read this series or not. Next is Wake by Lisa McMahon. Another book that I enjoyed at the time, but it's just gotten to the point where I'm not really interested in reading them again. I think with this one I'd have to reread it as well. I don't really remember what happens at the end. I remember the beginning of the book just basically because the synopsis kind of explains it, but yeah, Not gonna happen, I don't think. Next is the House of Night series by PC and Kristen Cast. When I picked this book up, I don't think I was aware of the fact that there were so many books in this series, and so I read it. I quite enjoyed it. I did have my issues with it. Some issues I was aware that become worse and worse later on in the series, and I didn't enjoy it enough to want to commit to so many other books in this series, so I'm giving up after the first book. Now for my last series that I will not be finishing, and that is Generation Dead by Daniel Waters. I read this first book and I really enjoyed it. At that time the second book hadn't come out yet, so it took me like a year or two to finally get it. So when I eventually read the sequel, I was extremely disappointed. I did not like it at all. I didn't really find that anything really happened. I was disappointed. So because of that, I have no urge at all to read the next book. It's sad. Because I really liked this book when I read it, so yeah. Oh well, what can you do? So those are all the series that I do not plan on finishing. I'd love to know your opinions about the ones that I've shown you, whether you think they are worth finishing or not. Even if they are worth it, I'm still not sure if I would, just because I've got so many other books and series that I need to finish first. Maybe one day in the distant future, but I doubt it. So apart from that, what is your #1 series that you do not want to finish? Very curious to hear what you think. Sure, I'll get some interesting answers on that. So yes, that is all. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and I'll see you later. Bye!